On this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, Vegas has the Pistons at 24.5 wins. The public thinks they're going over. We also talk about which Piston has the most to prove next season. All that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Let's do it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. It's myself, Aaron Johnson, joining me as always, my good friend Jasper Apollonia. Jasper, we've got a couple great topics to get into today. Definitely some conversation starters that I think everyone's going to have opinions on. We certainly want to hear them. So for anyone watching, for anyone listening, feel free to let us know what you think on what we talk about today. As always, at Palace of Pistons on X, you can leave it in the YouTube comment section if you are watching there. But excited to see what everyone has to say on what we're going to talk about today. But first off, Jasper, how you doing, my friend? You doing good?
I'm doing okay, man. I can't complain. Well, I can always complain. And in fact, I usually do. But I'm doing all right. The Pistons Summer League Championship dream dead once again. We do hate that for you. But they did get to play one extra game against the Utah Jazz, which was nice. Some good stuff coming out of there. But from here on out, we're all about the regular season. It's coming up. It's further away than we'd want it to be, but then every year in October we go, oh, that happened a lot quicker than we thought it would. So I'm excited to talk about what we have to talk about today, and I'm excited to get into it with you, my friend. Let's go.
Let's do it. Before we get into everything, though, we do got to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. As always, it's BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball, even to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, where the game starts. Let's start with somewhat of a gambling, somewhat of a betting topic. I know we want to get to Summer League, and we will after this, but let's start here. The other day, I saw a tweet, and I don't have the tweet pulled up, but it was someone talking about the over-under for the Detroit Pistons. Vegas set the line at 24.5 wins for the Detroit Pistons for the 2024-2025 season. It's so crazy we're talking about that. Time just flies. But the point being, 95% of the bets and 97% of the money on that line is on the over for the Pistons to win more than 24.5 games next season. Let's start here. Agree or disagree with the public. Are the Pistons winning more than 24.5 games next season?
Optimism springs eternal, does it not, my friend? I hate myself for saying this because I think 3 of the last 4 years I've picked the Pistons over. Last year I took the under, but 3 of the last 4 seasons I've taken the over on the Detroit Pistons win total, and God help me, I think I'm doing it again. And whenever you see a number like that where it's 97% of the money, you instinctively just go, oh, Vegas knows something we don't. That line's too high. Like, Vegas doesn't lose like that very often. I understand why the line is where it is. Look, if the Pistons win 11 more games than last year, that's just not something that happens very often, frankly. Like, teams don't improve their win total by double digits. But I think Detroit is in a a little bit of a special place here where honestly, I don't think it's a stretch to think that this is a winning proposition. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, as we all know, the roster is just better suited to the personnel, especially Cade Cunningham and what he does out there. Two, we saw how the Pistons improved once they got some personnel, some lineups out there that actually made sense for their roster last season. I mean, we've talked about it so many times on this podcast, like Asar Thompson just being able to play with Mike Muscala instead of Jalen Duren or James Wiseman or whoever it might have been in that position. It made such a big difference for Detroit. And the Simone Fontecchio, another example of a player that came in towards the end of the season and immediately paid dividends for Detroit. I think that is something that you have to pay attention to. And then last but certainly not least, the head coach. And that is something that was absolutely a factor in Detroit being as bad as they were last year. You knew they were not going to be a good team. They weren't very good under Dwayne Casey, as we all know, but they were at least a team that fought. They were a team that was respectable. And I think when you just put into consideration a better roster. I think this is a better roster than any of the other rosters Dwayne Casey had, certainly a better one than Monty Williams had. I think if you just put decent coaching and a bad but usable NBA lineup out there every single night, I think you can scrape your way to 25, 26 wins. To be clear, that would be a huge improvement. And improvements like that are just not common in the NBA. So I understand anybody who's having a level of trepidation around that decision. But when I look at it at the end of the day, I just think with those factors in play, unless there's a monumental injury to like Cade Cunningham or something like that, I think that's absolutely something that just changes the entire outlook of your season, no matter what. Unless that happens, I do think with at least 75 games of Cade and a relatively non-disastrous, result in terms of injuries, I think they can scrape to 25, 26, maybe even more than that. Who knows? It won't be easy, but I think they can get there. Aaron, I'm interested to see where you come down on this because, like we said, it's a big increase, and those kind of numbers, they make you a little nervous, don't they?
I am very much a subscriber to the fade the public mindset. Vegas is just too good at it. There's a reason that they make money. I very much believe when the public is so hard on one side to just bet against them. It's like a principle for me at this point. But I just can't find myself doing that here. I look at this team and I feel a bit optimistic about that number. Last year, I was very much on the other side. Last year, said from the jump, under. This year, I look at that number, and if I didn't know the percentage of bets and the percentage of money that was on the over, I feel like I'd very confidently say that I'd take the over there. I think 25 wins is very much attainable for this team. And, I could see some discussions later on in the dog days of the offseason where we talk about, is there a world where the Pistons could, make a run at that 9th or 10th seed and find themselves in the play-in picture? And if I feel like the Pistons are worthy of at least having that conversation of there being a world where that's possible, then I'd have to think that they're very capable of winning 25 or more games this year. And I do think that's the case. I will say that I think they'll go over this line despite the public being on them and that concerning me. I just think the roster is so much better. I think adding numerous NBA caliber players to this team, Tobias Harris, you're getting a full season of Simone Fontecchio. You bring in some depth in guys like Paul Reed, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr. You're getting another year of development for someone like Asar Thompson. Maybe Jalen Duren takes a jump this year. You're putting actual talent around Cade Cunningham for the first time in his career. I'm just feeling a bit optimistic about the idea of them winning a little bit more than 24 games this season. I don't know if I'd go as far to say they could compete for a play-in spot, that's a conversation for another time. But when you look at the Eastern Conference, there are a number of teams that are going to be bad this year. Brooklyn is going to be horrific. Atlanta looks like they are going to rebuild. You have other teams like Charlotte who have been bad for years now. What do the Raptors look like this year? Are they able to take a sort of jump with their new big three of Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett? Like, there's going to be bad teams in the conference. Washington's going to be abysmal. There will be opportunities for the Pistons to win more than 25 games this year. That is for certain. And I think with what they've added, the experience, the talent, just the veterans that they now have, and a new coach that, quite frankly, has shown he could win and win with a team that has dealt with injuries or maybe not the best overall fit of talent. Like, yeah, I do think the Pistons will go over this line. I think they will win more than 24 games this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think there's something that you just have to take into account, which is the bottom 7 of the East is really bad. We're talking about the Bulls, Hawks, Nets, Raptors, Hornets, Wizards, and of course your Detroit Pistons. Those are all not good teams. And I'm not saying the Pistons are going to be the best of that bunch. Nowhere close, honestly. Like I don't think that they're going to be in that a mid-high 30s win total. It's just I have a very hard time seeing that. But they don't have to be the best of that bunch to beat 24.5 wins. Look, if the Pistons finished with the 6th worst record in the NBA last year, they would have the same record as the Toronto Raptors, who won 25 games. And I don't think that that's outside of the realm of possibility. Do I think that, 97% of the money should be on the over? Maybe not. I definitely see a world in which the Pistons do not hit that mark. Like, I could see them winning 23 games, and that would still be a marked improvement over last season. But for all the factors that we've laid out here, and just the fact that it's not that hard to hit 25 wins, it really isn't. You just have to not be one of the 5 worst teams in the entire league. I think the Pistons are even decent? No, but do I think they could be the 6th worst team in the NBA, the 7th worst team in the NBA? I think it's within the realm of possibility. And yeah, that's another factor. Like you said, bringing in veterans, I think that's a big thing for this team. Like, them losing 28 games in a row last year, I just don't think that happens if you have a veteran presence, if you're staggering lineups, if you have a workable NBA roster. So for those very reasons, it's tentative that I'm taking the over. It certainly is, and I could see it going wrong very quickly, very easily. But yeah, as of right now, I like it. I like the over. I see them winning like 26, 27 games.
Weirdly enough, I think I'd feel a little bit more confident in taking the over if I knew what they were doing at the backup point guard position. Like, I know that's a small thing in theory, but at the same time, like, I think there'd be a pretty significant difference between having someone like Tyus Jones as your backup point guard, or if it's going to end up being Marcus Sasser. So I think that certainly plays a factor in it, despite it seeming like a smaller thing. I think that definitely plays a role. And look, I think there might even be some pressure for this team to beat that line this year. I mean, you just signed your franchise player to a max contract. You just brought in Tobias Harris to a significant deal, despite being short term, but it's big money. Like, they have a mix of veterans and a mix of young guys that they believe in, apparently. Like, you need to be able to compete a little bit. They don't have to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but like, they can just be bad and not be historically bad and beat this line. And that would be okay for them, considering where they were at last year, all of the bad habits that they've built, and having to bring in a ton of new players and build the chemistry with all these new guys, as well as implementing a new system with a new head coach. So yeah, I think the Pistons can and need to beat this line, but there's definitely a world where they don't. And, if they go into the season and Marcus Sasser is the team's backup point guard, then maybe I want to go back on this and say I'll take the under, but I still think the Pistons have another move or two to make. They have an open roster spot. He might be involved as a third team in a trade that's coming down the line in at some point. So I'll say optimistically that Pistons can, should, and will clear this line.
But even then, like you bring up Marcus Sasser, that's less of an issue this year than it was last year, because last year, if you still had Monty Williams as the head coach, you would be playing Marcus Sasser 20 minutes a night. With JB Bickerstaff there, he's already talked about staggering Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey's minutes. And I think that alone just makes, is it going to be 10 wins over the course of a season? No, but even if it's 2-3 wins, like that adds up. That makes a difference. If your starting lineup is better and your bench doesn't absolutely crater your chances of winning every single game, you absolutely can string together 11 more wins. You know what I mean? Like if you're not going on a historic losing streak, if you don't have by far the worst bench in the NBA, you're looking at it's just water finding its level. You know what I mean? It's not even like, oh my God, you've got such a great team. It's just like, you're just being regular bad instead of historically bad. And I think that alone can get you an extra 8, 9, 10 wins. Whether it's 11 wins or not is to be determined. But even if you do go into the season with Marcus Sasser as your backup point guard, that doesn't mean he's playing all the backup point guard minutes. It doesn't even necessarily mean he's playing any of the backup point guard minutes. Like you bring in another veteran, unfortunately, and this may be breaking news for some, one of the hottest, and I mean that in terms of looks, not in terms of his desirability, hottest free agent point guards is off of the market. That is right, folks. Killian Hayes has signed a contract with the Brooklyn Nets. I'm so sorry. But on the other hand, that's a team you can pretty much count on being worse than Detroit this year. So that's one team leapfrogged in the standings. You can't allow the team with Killian Hayes on it to beat you this year. You just cannot. I don't know. I might be looking forward to Killian Hayes, Ben Simmons minutes more than I am Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey minutes.
Cam Thomas might score 40 points a game this year, especially with the guys that Brooklyn's putting around him. I mean, so many guys that cannot shoot the basketball. Not to go off on a tangent here, but what a weird roster.
Well, if Cam Thomas scores 40 points a game, then the Brooklyn Nets might score 60 points a game in total. I saw somebody online say, well, Killian should put up some numbers this year. He's got shooting around him. What? No. Unfortunately, Killian Hayes will crater that shooting because he can't shoot for shit. So that's, yeah. Oh boy. Good luck to the Brooklyn Nets this year. I see what you're doing. Best of luck to you in the lottery, my friends. I see you are going for all those Cooper flag ping pong balls. So hats off to you.
So both of us are over on the 24.5 wins for the Pistons. We both think that they'll exceed that total. And with that, I think that's a good opportunity to move into our second topic. Another, maybe more of an optimistic topic, considering we're talking Summer League, and the last 2 games of Summer League for the Pistons were certainly Ron Holland's best performances in Vegas. I was able to catch the highlights of the last game against Utah. I did not get to watch the full game, but Holland clearly looked better. I still think there's some things that might keep him out of the rotation for Detroit, at least at the start of next season. That's something that I wrote about on palaceofpistons.com. You can go check it out there. I'd highly recommend it. The link to the website will be in the episode description wherever you're watching or listening to this show from. So please take a moment over there to go check that out and read what I had to say there. But nonetheless, Holland looked good against Utah and had a better game before that. Jasper, I know you were watching. What did you think about Holland and maybe someone like Bobby Klintman in those final 2 games for the Vegas Pistons?
Yeah, it was interesting to me. I thought Ron Holland looked a lot more comfortable, and it was nice to see him look more comfortable in some of the facets of his game that I think we thought he was lacking in his first couple of games in summer league. He looked way better around the rim. His finishing was far more controlled. He threw down a nasty reverse windmill jam in his last game against the Jazz. That was really fun to see. Just getting out in space a little bit more and being able to use his athleticism near the rim to get not easy looks, because they were hard looks, but like being able to finish with some really acrobatic moves. That was very nice to see. I enjoyed seeing that. There's also an aspect of it where his shooting numbers were not good in summer league. He didn't have a single game where he, shot the lights out of the ball by any means. However, I thought when you just look at his shooting form, it's one of those things where I'm far more confident in Holland developing an outside shot than I am in, say, Asar Thompson developing that aspect of his game. His shot looks pretty good, and I could see him with a year or two under Fred Vinson just getting in the gym, putting up shots. I could definitely see him maybe not being a knockdown sharpshooter, but at least being a guy who's passable from outside. You brought up Bobby Clintman. I thought it was actually a little bit of the opposite with him. It was a little discouraging to see him not finish so well at the rim. He really did not shoot very good inside of the arc during summer league, and I think that that's something, we talked about him being a rotation player perhaps in the future. I think this is why he was in the second round. I think this is why he still needs a little bit of work before we're kicking one of these veterans out of the rotation for him. Yeah, I think the outside shooting looks really good. The creativity with the passing looks nice. The rebounding numbers were great, but his finishing at the rim, not so much. So that's an aspect of his game I think he definitely needs some work, some refinement on. Just seeing him be a little bit more comfortable as a scorer. He looks really good as a passer, but as a scorer, I think he definitely needs some work there. Obviously, he's getting time with the Pistons this year. It's going to be in end of game situations, or in a situation where they're not going to be asking him to shoulder a big offensive load outside of probably just catch and shoot situations, a little bit of passing, get some rebounds, play tough defense. Great. I like all those things from him. But he definitely needs a little bit of work. And then the last guy I think we should touch on, Marcus Sasser. I know I was, and I think you were too, hoping for a little bit of a bounce back with him, perhaps over these last two games. I didn't see it. I thought he looked absolutely horrible against the Jazz. He was not very inspiring against the Knicks either. He only shot like 6 of 14. He had 24 points because he was getting to the line a lot, but for me in summer league, that's not really something that I'm looking for in the regular season, especially with Marcus Sasser. Like, if he's getting to the line that much, that means that he has the ball in his hands a ton, and he's doing a lot of driving to the rim and looking off teammates. Just did not look comfortable as a passer, and really did not look very efficient as a scorer either. So I'm very worried about Marcus Sasser. A little bit more hopeful with Ron Holland and Bobby Clintman, but both those guys, as we know, are projects. Sasser is a guy that, as of right now, the Pistons really need. And as we've touched on last week, this may be a little added impetus for this front office to go after a real legit veteran backup point guard. I said Dennis Smith Jr. I still feel that way. I think if they could get him in there, I think that would be a really good look for this rotation.
Agreed. I think they certainly need to go out and look for just a little bit more depth at the point guard spot. What did you think, though, about Ron Holland in the sense of, does he have a place in the rotation next season? Like I said, I wrote about it on PalacesofPistons.com. I want you to go read my thoughts there. I want you to go subscribe there. It's free. I want you to go there and do that to really hear what I have to say on him. I will give you a quick little bit of information on why I'm out on him getting a rotation spot right away. I just think the lack of shooting, the lack of comfort on offense with the ball in his hands, I know we played better against Utah, but if he wasn't dunking it inside, I think he had a lot of the similar finishing issues that Bobby Clintman had, where he just wasn't finishing inside the paint. And if he's shooting 23% from the 3-point line and can't really finish inside yet in the NBA. Like, just hard for me to see him getting NBA minutes when he doesn't do a whole lot of else on offense. And he's not a connector with the ball in his hands. He doesn't move the ball very well. Like, I get the energies there. I get the efforts there. But with this team, with the depth it has on the wing, I just think it looks a little bit difficult for him to get rotation minutes right away for a head coach that, has shown he's a guy that leans on his veterans, guys that have that experience. Like, again, Ron Holland will play this upcoming season. There will be opportunities for him. I just don't know if it'll be right away. Where are you on that, Jasper?
Yeah, I agreed with pretty much everything you wrote in your piece and everything you said right there. I just don't think he's there at this point in time. And for the reasons you've outlined, they just have too many veterans that can at least give them a consistently respectable output every night. And when you look at Ron Holland, the consistency is the number one thing that I feel he will struggle with early on at this point in his career. Yeah, he's going to have good games. He's going to have bad games. That's fine. He's young. He's raw. There will be opportunities for him to get out and run the floor and do the things that he can do right now, play with that energy. But it's just not something you can count on, I think, night in, night out at this point in his career. I completely agree with you. I think a stint in the G League could perhaps do him well. If they feel like he's better suited to sit on the bench and come in and mop up situations, or situations where, they're kind of getting killed and they just need a little spark of energy, fine. I'm cool with that. But I think your piece was pretty much spot on. He's just not there right now, and they're going to need to bring him along slowly. And frankly, I would assume that is how they anticipated this season going when they drafted him in the first place. Like, if Trajan Langdon drafted Ron Holland expecting him to be a day one contributor, then that's a big issue, because he just signed a bunch of guys that should be playing over Ron Holland for the money that they're making. Even a novice scout like you or me could see from his play with the G League that he just wasn't there coming into this draft. Like, that's why we had some trepidation around him, because it was like, well, he's not there now, and it takes a skilled eye to see exactly what he could develop into. So now work on the jumper, work on the finishing, work on the consistency, work on the comfort with the ball in your hands. The playing time will come. There will be opportunities in the next year or so, but he needs some refinement first.
Again, go check out the post on palaceofpistons.com. Link in the description wherever you're watching. Let's move into our third and final topic. I think we're good on Summer League now that it's come and gone, and it's been a few days since the Pistons have even had a game, so it's probably out of most people's minds if you're a sicko that even watch it. I will say that on two of the games later in the tournament, or whatever you want to call it, I had people tweeting me asking for lineup information for a Summer League game. And I have seen some insane tweets and reactions to Pistons Summer League. Someone tweeted out, is Dennis Jenkins what we thought Jordan Bone was going to be? And the stuff like that just absolutely kills me, because I think I'm a sicko, and I think I maybe watch too much basketball or care too much about Summer League or this or that. And then I see people pulling Jordan Bone out of their pocket and making player comparisons to Jordan Bone in the year of 2024. And part of me is like, oh my gosh, step outside, touch some grass. The other part of me is like, I respect the hell out of it that you could even think of that. And your basketball street credit there goes up a little bit, despite you being an absolute sicko for even thinking of comparing Dennis Jenkins and Jordan Bone. I've got to say, I thought I was the craziest person online when it came to at least Pistons Summer League, but no, I'm wrong. There were a lot of people this year very, very much tuned in to what was going on in Vegas with the Detroit Pistons.
Guy who's only ever watched Darren Hilliard highlights, watching the Detroit Pistons Summer League. I'm getting a lot of Darren Hilliard vibes from this one. Like, that's oh my God, I love it. Yeah, look, I'll say this. Obviously, the Jordan Bone talk is ridiculous. He's clearly more of a Peyton Siva type, and I think it's frankly absurd that we're even giving this kind of tweeting the time of day. I mean, it's sick, it's trolling. There's no legitimacy to it whatsoever. I'm disgusted. Absolutely disgusted. I mean, what would Vernon Macklin have to say about this? You know what I mean?
Oh, there was a 2K where he was actually a decent point guard. There was, I swear, because I used to always do like a build your own team or whatever, and I used to always start with like free agents and all these guys that weren't actually on NBA teams, and I grabbed him and he was fine. Or maybe I'm thinking of Shelvin Mack, another wild pull there, but
okay, well, Shelvin Mack was always good, so I don't know what you're talking about there, brother.
He was on several NBA teams. We could do a whole podcast just like pulling random.
Dude, let's talk let's talk Brevin Knight, brother. Like, let's do it. What do you think Joel Prisbilla is up to these days? Like, come on, man. Like,
it's literally that viral tweet of like guys will just sit around, hang out, and name random athletes and have a great time. And it's like,
oh my God, yeah. Oh, if I'm walking down the street and some guy just goes Alex Acker at me, I'm like, let's hang out. Let's hang out, dude. Yeah, let's do this, brother.
Telling you, put me outside with a bonfire and a beer, and we can just name athletes. Like we could pull Pistons names out for a couple hours, and I'd have a grand old time.
I think we could create world peace by just getting every member of Congress together and having them go on Sporkle. I think that could really do it.
I just had a content idea. This one might have to be paywalled, though. We might have to get all the Palace of Pistons together to do just that. Just hang out and start naming old Pistons and start talking about old Pistons careers. But all right, we're getting a little bit off track here. Although maybe there's
really? Do you think so?
Names themselves, and let me know what you've got in the comment section. What are some old Pistons you can pull out there for me? Don't pull out Walter Herman. I need some like real names. Like give me some good ones. Not some basic ones, but
those first two games of 2008, brother. Oh, Walter Herman, 16 points. Anyway,
all right, let me be the host since Mike's not here. Let me keep us moving. Let me try to be the half of the professional that Mike is. But let's move into our final topic. We're talking about next season. We're talking about a player on the Pistons roster that has the most to prove. We each came with one who we think has the most to prove next year. Jasper, start with you.
Okay. I think this is a player that some people, when they hear me say his name, they're going to go, what are you talking about? Because if anything, he's pretty much the only player on this roster that's proved anything in his career. But I have to go with Cade Cunningham. And I understand that might be something that takes people aback a little bit when you look at all the other players on this roster that have so much to prove. But the reason I'm saying Cade is because this is the future of the franchise. And look, Cade Cunningham has had some great games in his NBA career. He's had some bad games in his NBA career. But the results in terms of wins and losses have not been there. And this is ultimately what Cade's legacy is going to be determined by. We know he can put up numbers. That's great. Can he lead a team to, forget even a playoff spot, just being a respectably bad team? I think when you look at the investment that the front office put around him this year in terms of shooting, in terms of veterans, in terms of complementary players to Cade Cunningham's skill set, this is to me a little bit of a prove it year. Not prove that you can score, not prove that you can pass the ball, not prove that you can be the best player on the floor for your team, because we've seen him do that, but prove that the doubts that people have about your game, that they're unfounded. Prove that everything your supporters have been saying in terms of get Cade some shooting and the results will follow, prove that those statements are accurate. Prove that the investment that this front office and this ownership just put into you, a rookie max contract, that it's warranted, that it's not just there to show that you could put up numbers, but show that you can be the leader of this team, that you can be the leader of this franchise, that you are the future of this franchise moving forward, and that you are the building block, the foundational piece that you were drafted as when you were the number 1 overall pick in 2020. We're going into year 4 now. This is not put up or shut up time when it comes to being a playoff team. This is just put up or shut up for, like, are you the guy that we drafted? Are you the player that makes everyone around him better? Are you the hub of an offense that is actually a NBA offense, not the pitiful display that we've seen these last couple of years? Are you that guy? So for me, when I look at this roster, yes, there are players that need to prove that they're NBA players. There's players that need to prove they can shoot. There's players that need to prove they can coexist with Cade Cunningham. But the key to not just this Pistons season, but the seasons to come, is going to come down to what Cade Cunningham is able to provide your team in terms of wins and losses. So for me, this is a crucial, crucial year for Cade, because look, if you invest all this and you don't, forget even beating the win total. If you can't beat 22, 23, you can't even get to 24 wins, I think you have to, as a front office, perhaps start to reevaluate what the direction of your franchise is in terms of its best player. Because in my eyes, the excuses are running out. I'm not saying I'm going to give up on Cade if this season is not a successful one, but I think you're going to have to seriously question whether he is that guy for you. So for me, it's Cade Cunningham.
I'm going to go with Jalen Duren. For a guy that had such a promising rookie season, he had so many bright spots in year 1. Whereas last year, I think there was to be brutally honest, there was more bad moments than good moments for Duren. There's got to be a sense of urgency here in year 3 for a multitude of reasons to put it together. And it's the fact that he's eligible for a new contract after this upcoming season. It's the fact that he's playing for a new general manager, and there's rumblings that the new general manager isn't maybe the biggest Jalen Duren guy. He has to be better. He's far too talented to be right now limited as he is on offense, as just kind of a finisher at the rim, playing the pick and roll. But to just be this black hole defensively that does not help you. In fact, he hurts you on that end of the court. So he has a huge, huge, huge opportunity this year. The Pistons, as of yet, have not gone out and brought in anyone that is capable of starting over him. But he has to come out this year and prove it. This is a guy that has been invited to Team USA twice. He's been a part of the select team now twice. He's viewed very, very, very highly. Other NBA players speak very, very highly of him. He has to put a lot together here in year 3 with the opportunity that he has, the better team around him that he has. But he has to give you the effort. He has to lock in on the defensive end of the court. He even said, like last year, there wasn't like some injury that was just holding him back from being able to compete defensively. Like he just was not locked in on that side of the court. And he has to be. He has to be. There's no world where he can't be. If he is worth a second contract with the Pistons, if he is worth using as a building block, as your center of the future, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, he has to take a major, major leap. It doesn't all have to take place next season, but he has to take a big one. And he has to prove that he is worthy of all this hype, that he is worthy of all this recognition. He has far too much talent. He has far too much athleticism. He has far too much size. Year 3, prove it or lose it. Show that you can be a starting center in the NBA. Don't have to be an all-star, but you are far too talented to be as bad as he was in year 2, quite frankly. And I think he will be better. I would certainly wager on it. Like he just has to be. You can't be worse than he really was last year on the defensive end of the court. So Jalen Duren is my pick there. I think he's capable of being better. it's on him and the coaching staff to get him there.
And that's the great thing about having JB Bickerstaff as your coach now. You've seen him put together really great defense in Cleveland with two big men. And I think when you look at, Jalen Duren, hey, if there's a coach who's going to help you develop into any sort of a defender, it's a guy who's coached Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and has the defensive track record to prove it. So, yeah, I think he's running out of excuses there as well. Like you're running out of excuses in terms of the players in front of you. They're going to be better defensively. And you're running out of excuses in terms of having a coaching staff that doesn't seem willing or able to improve you on the defensive end. I think to both of those guys as well, they both need to prove that they can stay healthy a little bit. Like that's certainly been an issue for both Cade and Jalen Duren. Jalen Duren with the ankles, Cade with various lower body injuries and stuff like that. And to be clear, these are just our picks. There are multiple other players on this roster that you could make an argument for, and I would be willing to listen to. Just a couple, I think Asar Thompson certainly has something to prove with his shooting. Jaden Ivey has to prove that he is a part of this core moving forward. Ron Holland, I certainly think, has something to prove as well. Is he capable of becoming a rotation player? And Marcus Sasser, a guy that we already touched on too, if he is going to be the backup point guard for this team, my goodness, he has a lot to prove in that department as well. So there's a lot of players I think I'd be willing to listen to an argument to. And if you think that one of the guys I touched on, or maybe even somebody else, fits that mold better than Cade Cunningham or Jalen Duren does, let us know. We'd love to hear about it in the YouTube comments. We do enjoy the debate. And just having something else to think about is always a good time. So, I like that pick. Honestly, Aaron, I was between Cade, Jalen Duren, and Jaden Ivey as my three guys. I went with Cade because I do think that there is definitely a little bit of a narrative that he needs to shift as he goes into his age 23 season. But I certainly don't disagree with you. Jalen Duren has a lot to prove as well.
Plenty of guys that you could have picked for your answer there, but I think both of us had good ideas. And when you're talking about, major pieces of the core, I don't think you can go wrong there.
Luckily for Tobias Harris, this doesn't have to be the year where he proves he can play well in the playoffs.
No, not this year, most likely. But quickly here, I want to take a moment to thank all of the listeners on YouTube, watchers on YouTube that bared with us last week. Had the podcast come out twice before we finally got it to go up correctly the third time over. So I know there was some audio issues the first and second time that it got uploaded, and it still had people listening and the support since the third one's come out. Like I put it back up a few days later because I finally got the audio to work and was like, okay, probably not going to get too many viewers on it, but just want to get it up there for consistency's sake. And ton of views, everyone's coming out and supporting as always, so really appreciate that. We're going to have the podcast regardless of where we're at in the off season. We are unfortunately really starting to enter the dog days now that free agency is pretty much wrapped up. Summer league is over. We're still probably at least 3 weeks out from getting the NBA schedule for the 2024-25 season. So we're in the dog days now, unless Trajan Langdon's working on a move that's coming soon. It's going to get a little bit tougher to talk about the Pistons and talk about the NBA, but we're going to do it regardless. So appreciate everyone that has joined us this offseason. The growth has been spectacular. You guys are telling us what you think. You're telling us what you like. You're telling us what you dislike. You're chiming in on our topics. We really, really appreciate that. We love seeing that. If I could implore you all once again to go to palaceofpistons.com, subscribe to our Substack there. It's free. It gets all of our content directly into your email inbox as soon as it goes live on our website. You'll get this podcast. You'll get any written articles. You'll get the weekly drive that's written by Mike Angolano every week that recaps everything going on with the Pistons and around the Pistons. So highly, highly encourage and implore you to help and support us there. Palaceofpistons.com. Links wherever you are watching or listening from. Jasper, anything else on your end before we wrap up this week's episode of the podcast?
You're so right, Aaron. I want to echo what you just said there. It is incredible that there is at least 1,000 other sickos like us who actually want to hear people talk about the Detroit Pistons in the midst of July going into August when these, like you said, are the dog days of summer. The fact that there's like 1,000 of you out of there, sometimes even more, who still want to hear us commiserate on this podcast is genuinely incredible. It makes me very, very happy to see, what you and Mike and so many others built before I even joined this podcast, and having us have that consistent listenership. It truly is like mind blowing and so very much appreciated. So thank you to all of our listeners. As always, anyone who subscribed, like you said, if you don't subscribe, go ahead, just click it. Even if you just subscribe to us on YouTube, that's cool. Yeah, subscribe to us on Substack. We know you don't check your emails anyway. So like, what does it matter? It's just one more email for the inbox that you're gonna screen over anyway.
Let's check this one.
This one you should check. That's right.
This is the one that you check your email for.
That's right. Okay. I'm not a very good salesman, obviously, as you can tell.
We're taking for the class after this one. We're going to talk about the mistakes you just made on the test.
Yeah, that is true. Well, at least hopefully I'll be able to hear you when that happens. Not too much ringing. But yes, thank you all to all of our listeners. Truly, we do appreciate it. And Aaron, I think I'm gonna have to start brainstorming topics for next week the second we get off of here. Because yeah, I don't know. Maybe we could just name off a bunch of guys from the last 20 years of the draft. That's right.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Huge thanks to Believe and our sponsor, Bet Online. Again, use our promo code Believe, BLEAV, for a 50% free bet credit on your first deposit of up to $250. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for all your support. We greatly appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week for another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Take care.